Fire pomudi ni agobio Ghana fuani age efri say ya your local spices na ya frafra dia ya sankofa natural spice
me de go me jollof mu ni mi sti wa hodoma e ma ne dance
Stanley the barbecue the go on
sankofa natural spice and one you use 100% natural
Adofo mamunye huge mistake sankofa natural spices the
FDA ji ejedi nkratu yatu
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you.
Have you started working already?
Not really, because I haven't been approved and sworn in by the president, but the minister has been allowing me to sit in some of the meetings.
I'll come to you shortly.
I think it's going according to the plan that would culminate in the budget providing details. Now, if I may go back to the SONA, you saw the president taking charge, I wouldn't even say virtually, taking charge of the agenda going forward after he had told everybody in parliament based on his constitutional responsibility about the state of the economy, but moving ahead and saying we are going to fix it, as he's fond of saying. And that takes you back to 2013, thereabouts, when we had 2014, the Century Forum, as he mentioned, today. Now you are beginning to see from that and his presentation today, which again, when the president speaks, he speaks about high-level things, his responsibility to Ghanaians and manifesto promises that must be fulfilled. The minister today took it a notch, lower into details to show, one, what is it that the president has been talking about. These are the facts, based on data, based on statistics. But then he went on to compare us in many ways, sometimes, to our peers, to say that I am not saying something which advanced countries, have done and for which they have made progress, but I'm saying even the countries in our, category, some of who we were ahead of, today are surpassing us. And these are the facts. Then he goes on to outline what is it that His Excellency Mahama's economic policy will be, what are some of the solutions. So he's giving a flavor again of what will come ultimately as more details in the budget. He spoke about fiscal mostly because even if you took the monetary, as His Excellency said, much of the problem has been fiscal. But he went to the real sector. He picked on the sectors that have challenges, but the sectors that also have promise, and how we can get out of this. So I would say all of this will culminate in the budget, where there will be more facts, more, and at that point, and beginning from tomorrow actually, you will begin to see the sector ministers, particularly in the difficult areas of the economy, joining this forum, and beginning to give a bit more detail about sector policies. You will have the budget, and hopefully we will set the tone, for turning the economy around and back to growth.
I'll come back to you on some specifics, but let me come to the soon to be sworn-in deputy minister. How pleased are you with what you see, and particularly talk to us a bit about the approach of deciding to do a job in front of everybody for the whole nation on the truth of the nation. Why was that necessary?
It was necessary because the minister wanted to give a picturesque impression of some of the things that words cannot adequately explain. And so he decided to blend it with graphs and with tables so that people will appreciate the situation as it is. I realized that he was a bit careful not to use this platform to present the budget. And so you see that he didn't want to go into detail. So you see more. In fact, you hear a lot more on the 11th when he comes to present the budget. But a few of the things that he mentioned that I think we need to ponder about. He gave one of the graphs, indicated that the rate at which we are going, it will take us up to 2050 to get to an upper middle income status. But if we want to be innovative with moderate approach, we will be able to achieve that level in the year 2042. And we want to be ambitious. We can even do that earlier, sooner than that, around the year 2038. So the choice is ours. And that is why some of these discussions are important, so that all of us will agree on what we as a nation will want to do. That is why for me it is a worry that our friends on the other side decided to stay out of this important forum. When my boss's boss was finance minister, there was a similar forum in my constituency that they boycotted.
Senchi.
Yes, in Senchi that they boycotted. And unfortunately, they haven't been here too. President Mahama was clear that he knows the direction he wants to send this country, but he needs to build consensus. If you look critically, since 92, we have changed government from NDC to MPP back to NDC and to, so it is possible that in the next maybe 16, 20 or whatever years, MPP will have another opportunity to lead this country. What would we have gained if we gather only for them to come and scatter? What will be the gain if we reset this economy? President Mahama knows that he has only 4 years. And so he's doing everything to reset this economy within that 4 years. But there has to be sustained effort to make sure that that effort yields the needed results. That is why it is important for that consensus that he needs for everybody to be on the same page. Dr. K.Y. Amuako made a profound statement that economic development takes decades. And so we cannot achieve everything within the 4 years that mandate that President Mahama has. What we do beyond that will be what will give us the needed impact.
All right. Jumping off from there, so K.Y. Amuako actually said that there were 3 key requirements for development: strong leadership, policy consistency, and then citizen engagement with their government as a shared responsibility. You're talking about the leadership part when you said it's important. Director in the committee as well. For somebody who's working in the community, how do we deal with this issue of top staff? no party can live out forever. How do you think you can manage that up and down so that even though the entity is not here, there will be a way in which it can contribute on the structural reforms that this government can do?
Well, for policy consistency, I have always said that often when we accentuate certain positives, sometimes you have, you have transitions, and we dwell often a lot on on where we are, right? And we do not point into most of the time failures, right? I would hope that we would, for once, also begin to accentuate the positive. Let me give 2 examples. I think when we defaulted, the default was after HIPIC. And the difference now is that it came home to bite. The haircut which foreigners had for us and a HIPIC came home to bite, right? Now, suddenly, you saw that once the current minister, who was a deputy, moved on 2 things: treasury single account at the end of the year, consolidate government resources, which is a policy, we're implementing, because government resources are often scattered all over the place, right? We became liquid. Resources that were sitting had been allocated but were not being used, helped us, to begin to tackle the borrowing, right? This is a replay from the trade single accounts of going to 2016, when at the time it also resulted in being able to finance treasury bills and even bonds, repay part of the resources, and then you saw treasury bill rates coming down from about 23-24% to about 16% after we did the refinancing. This is one example of policy continuity. It has taken 10-year gap. The second one, I believe, we won't surprise you, the sinking fund, which was built up rapidly with the monies that were going in, and out of which we were able, to pay off, some. It should tell us that, one, much of what President Mahama is talking about, much of what the minister is talking about, are not necessarily new initiatives, but they are going to be initiatives, right? And if you remember during the campaign, President Mahama said, I'm going to tackle pipeline projects. You saw today in the data why we must tackle pipeline. Significant contracts that have been awarded. He gave the numbers. Road sector, energy sector, and all that. Why continue to award new contracts when you have, the pipeline? The pipeline was part of the homegrown policy in what we call the contract database, which didn't used to exist, which was created and set aside. So I'm saying that in as much as, we are looking at promises, we are looking at things that will be done, there is also an element of things that were done already. And that is important in another respect. It took us 1 year from 2013 to 2014 with assistance of African Development Bank to do the homegrown policy. And it took us to 2015 before we could negotiate the IMF program. Right now we are in an IMF program. You see the speed with which we are going because the elements of the homegrown policy have been proved to be relevant. And so the very first budget, which didn't happen in 2013, is going to come with solutions. Yes.
But let me come to you. So we know.
Thank you. But before I come to that, I think the earlier question you asked my boss's boss, he mentioned the policy consistency, and his example was from when he was finance minister, and that is being followed through by his deputy, who has now become the finance minister. He spoke about the sinking fund. And today in Ghana, when you mention sinking fund, another name for it is Setekwe. I mean, people credit him for that.
Correct.
I think what you wanted to find out was from one party to the other.
Exactly.
How do we ensure that there is that consistency? That is why I feel that we should not relent in bringing the MPP on board what we have started today. Even though they are not here today, we must find ways to get them to buy into whatever consensus we will build here. Because I believe that it is important for them to be on board so that whether in the next 16, 20 years or whenever they get the opportunity to manage the economy of this country again, they don't deviate from the course that will give us the fastest growth that we are all looking for. Now, President Mahama is clear. So far, you have seen that he's determined to fulfill all the campaign promises that he made to Ghanaians. And that includes the taxes that he promised that we will remove. And by the 11th of this month, when the finance minister comes to present the budget, you will realize that e-levy will be gone, betting tax will be removed and all that.
Will
but
COVID go?
COVID will go. I mean, they are the promises we made, and so we will deliver on the promises. We have identified that there is a huge tax gap. The minister mentioned that there is a huge VAT gap. In fact, the medium-term revenue strategy that was prepared, document that was prepared, estimated that we have a 61% VAT gap. That means we are collecting only 39% of our potential VAT revenue. And so we are going to ensure that we bridge that gap, and that will make up for the losses that we'll make with the removal of the taxes.
You mentioned that there could be a way in which you incentivize people to show that they have paid a certain tax so that you can do better tax enforcement. Yes. So it seems to me your policy is not so much new tax policy, but more ensuring that we are able to collect better. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes.
Rationalization. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I took a cue from what my minister said during his vetting, and I emphasized that. And conversations with him so far point to the fact that that is what he will be doing. And he mentioned already some taxes that were already there, but the previous government suspended it because of elections. I'm sure these are all avenues that we can use to rake in more taxes. And specifically, if you listen to him, he spoke about the economic rent from our extractive industry. That is something that we can take advantage of in order to bridge the gap.
My last question to you.
Part of the solution lies in what we were talking about, a moment ago. And let me just, you see, we're going to be rationalizing the taxes whilst you cut in taxes. Many of the taxes that have been reintroduced as levies, and yours truly was a VAT national coordinator, were actually taxes that the VAT replaced, right? And so if you have gone back and you are reintroducing taxes that the VAT replaced, and you are not doing better than the VAT, but rather you are being told that this is an impediment to VAT. Let me give you two quick examples. National Health Insurance Levy, Get Fund. They were introduced partly because of political difficulty, but they were 2.5% each of VAT, and they were collected as though they were VAT. And the reason you collect them as though they were VAT, quite apart from increase the VAT, is that businesses, right, like your entity, it's not a consumer. So when you buy, inputs like this equipment we are seeing here, you have the right to offset the credit before from the advertisement, revenues on which you had imposed the tax. Now, when you remove these two from the VAT base, you block that credit to business. What does it happen? What happens? The VAT is added. What used to be credit and refund is added to your cost, and we say it cascades, because for as long as that somebody advertising agent is not, also the consumer, it just keeps increasing, and then you have evasion and avoidance. So when you rationalize and you bring back, the Get Fund and the NHI as VAT, and you give business credit, you minimize evasion and avoidance. And then when you introduce another tax measure, which is the ITAS, which was suspended, should have been done about 10 years ago, as phase 2, right, of ICOMS. And let me use VAT again to illustrate this particular point. The bulk of credit that is taken for VAT and refund is actually import VAT, right? Now, that import VAT is sitting in ICOMS because it was collected by customs. But there is no domestic tax system, which would download that information and say that, Bernard, paid VAT of 100. So if Bernard is claiming that VAT as input tax credit and is claiming 120, it means that he's cheating the system with 20, right? So it is not just sending people into the field. And so we need the ITAS. Right. And that's a top priority and that is the rationalization plus reform. And we will definitely
if we do that, we will raise enough domestic resources, irrespective of the uncertainty of donor support.
Yes, but yes, because we need to generate domestic revenue.
Wonderful.
As subsidy, that's one of the,
it's an ongoing conversation. We are here at the sidelines of the National Economic Dialogue.
In a fast-growing urban environment like Accra, safety should not be too far-reaching. It should be as easy as ABC. Hear the real stories from those who now feel safe like never before with Response 1.
We were held at gunpoint in our own home, and they got away with it.
We didn't have Response 1 back then. That was the most terrifying experience of our lives.
But after that, we subscribed to Response 1 to ensure that never happens again. The last time the hoodlums tried, we had installed Response 1 monitored alarm system. Their response team arrived, followed by the police, to ensure we are safe.
Don't wait for tragedy to strike. Protect your home with Response 1's monitored alarm system and our theft protection guarantee. Immediate response, real protection. Response 1. Stay connected, stay protected.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations first on 2 counts.
Thank you.
On your appointment as GRA boss, and also on this job you did. Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Yes, 3 weeks, exactly.
How did you pull it off? Because I can't imagine how over 1,000 people, 2 weeks to pull this off. How did you do it?
Well, I think everything, when you have a good leadership and a teamwork, you're able to succeed. We're lucky to have a very experienced, formidable leader in the person of our chairman, Dr. Ishmael Yamson. And then, of course, the rest of the members of the team are also very experienced and committed. And also learning from history, we got all the support. But I must say it was a very strenuous work because we were meeting every day. And you can imagine our full-time work was there, and this also happened. But we are grateful for all the teamwork and the support. We're hoping that the deliberations will be fruitful, and at the end of it all, we will all reach some consensus which will be beneficial for national development.
For someone who is going to lead the revenue.
I think we must be grateful to God for the president that he has given to us. And he has indicated that we need to reset Ghana, which also includes resetting the economy. And if you look at this century, at the end of 2025, a quarter of this century is already gone. And therefore, we are just at the threshold of the next quarter, which will take us to 2050. It's so important that we reset our economy in a manner that will enable us to build our nation, to create the necessary opportunities for ourselves and for future generation. And therefore, one couldn't have talked about revenue mobilization without actually rebuilding the economy. Because after all, in every economy, it's when businesses do well, or let me say taxes or revenue are collected from businesses, irrespective of which type of tax you look at it. And therefore, when the economy is not doing well, it affects business growth, it affects business profit, and obviously the taxes you collect. And similarly, if businesses are doing well, it's given that revenue should go up together with the level of compliance. And therefore, for me, hitting the ground running, it's also important that this component of understanding what we need to do to build the economy is part of it. Because when we support businesses to grow and we support businesses to succeed, then of course we can have the opportunity to collect the taxes that are necessary for our national development.
Now, Mr. Sapon, Ghana lags behind.
I think this is a very important question, and it's also a complex matter, as you describe it, both within the context of tax policy and then, of course, tax administration, in other words, implementing the policies and the laws that we do have. And it's complex because if you, again, look at this country, you can segment the country into various components. You have the high-level developed businesses, you have the middle-level businesses that are thriving but putting up their processes together, and you have the very huge informal sector, which some statistics indicate is plus 60 or 70% of our GDP. So if you have 70% of contribution to economic development, which is informal sector, then you really have a challenge, because within this sector, you have a lack of documentation, a lack of appreciation of the policies, and even the general willingness as an individual or businesses to voluntarily pay their taxes. But that's where we come in as GRA or tax administrators. I believe that we are at a point where, in terms of policy, there's a lot of policies and tax regulations that are in our books. What we need first is to deepen that, and that deepening means bringing a lot more people who are outside the net into the tax net, and also those who are in it, which we haven't reached our full potential, bring them onto it. One sure way, as far as I'm concerned, together with my management, is the use of technology. We are at a point where if we embrace technology and write technology as tax administrators, we should be at par or even ahead of the taxpayer. And I'll give you an example. So today, if you look at Ghana, many businesses, when they want to set up, they are mindful to register with a register of businesses. And we have a situation where when you register with the register of businesses, your national ID is required. And the policy is that the national ID serves as your tax identification. So one way is to use technology to collaborate with the registration point. So ab initio, even before businesses start, they are already integrated into the tax net. But to do that will mean we as GRA must invest in the right technologies. Secondly, today, if you look at many emerging businesses, and if you go to Instagram, for example, people advertise their businesses on Instagram, and yet they don't find themselves in the tax net. Again, through AI and technology, we need to start the conversation and be able to harness the data. So one using technology is one sure way to bring everybody in gradually to the tax net. Second is tax education, because paying tax is not palatable for everybody. But we must ensure that we are all contributing to it as a civic responsibility. And one way is through tax education. GRA has done some educations in the past, but we believe that going forward, this must be a sustained education for citizens to know that it is rightful and proper to voluntarily pay their taxes. And the third one I would say is partnership. Sometimes there are differences and challenges between the tax administrators and the taxpayer, and many sometimes describe it as tax administrators using more forces than we need to. I believe that we have to employ partnership, collaboration, faster dispute resolution to solve tax issue, and to give comfort to the taxpayer that they must pay their taxes and we must collect the taxes in a manner that is fair and responsive.
As you rightly said, over 70% of our people are employed in the SME sector. But the contribution to GDP, according to the GSS, is less than 40%.
Right.
Some people feel that it's because their incomes are low. So these are small companies. And that for a country like Ghana, we should focus a lot more on the middle. Now they're talking about larger companies. These companies tend to benefit from tax exemptions. So globally, there's a big conversation about illicit financial flows generally, and then tax exemptions which are considered unsustainable for larger companies. Now that global donor support is reducing, and there's pressure on countries like Ghana to raise their own internal resources, what is your offer for the middle group? Large corporates who need tax exemptions to stimulate growth and employment, but also need to pay enough taxes to give government. It's like a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
What is the how nuanced should our thinking be around those companies, large companies, steel companies? They are employing 3,000 people. They need tax exemptions so that their raw material cost will not be too high, and yet because they generate so much revenue, we also need the revenue to build the roads for them. What's your offer to them, and how are you going to navigate that very careful, complicated area?
Okay. Yeah. So this again, as you rightly say, is a complex area, and is bordering on policy, which are actually outside my pay grade. Policy sits with our minister, which is Minister of Finance, and we as GRA have the implementation. However, in all policies, of course, we are consulted and we give our proper advice. I think first of all, it's important to understand that government business has to run all the time, and it's not going to stop. And therefore, at each point in time, we need to raise needed revenue to support government business. And in particularly in respect of our President John Mahama for his vision, we need to make sure that relevant domestic tax is mobilized to support his agenda. The second one is, how do you raise the revenue in a manner that is sustainable? And when you're talking about sustainability, that's where the big companies come in. These may be matured businesses that are already offering employment and doing their businesses and paying their rightful tax. First of all, how do we ensure that their businesses are not disrupted from tax efficient compliance point of view? So on our side, we need to make sure that our engagement with them, our processes with them is efficient and allow them to focus on their business. Second, where we believe that some of the incentives that are given to them may not be rightly applied, it is our duty to make sure that we raise it with our minister and calls for a review. For every position, once you start, there's always opportunity to look at that. But also importantly is in terms of the area of deepening is how to widen. And we talked about the informal sector, that majority may not be in it. And also again in the middle bit to deepen it. Some are already in it, but are we really collecting all the potential taxes that we need to get from them? I would say no. An example is the area of VAT. And as the minister presented, if you look at our peers, our VAT performance is below expectation compared with our peers. In fact, in some jurisdictions, VAT contributes about between 45 to 50% of the tax bucket. In Ghana, we are doing below 20%. And this is not something to be proud of, because if you look at a country like Ghana, which is developing, consumption tax should drive most of our taxes, because even if I cannot see your income, you will buy water, you will buy food, and therefore consumption tax should be a way that we must all contribute. So again, as the minister said, we'll be looking at the VAT and how to revamp it in a manner that will ensure that we deepen it from that angle. So I believe that all the three segments have to be tackled. Those that are matured in paying their taxes, how to support them. Areas that are already in the net, how to deepen, to improve upon it. And those who are not in it, we have to engage and use technology to make sure that they all come in.
Let me just take a bonus question now.
Right.
This is the question many have been dying for me to ask you. When you were appointed initially, there were agitations by certain factors or people in the NDC that we don't know him.
Right.
And there were even demonstrations at the venue. They've come down now. But clear the issue for us. Have you always been working in the NDC? Because I know you were a senior person in one of the big four.
Right.
And you were doing a lot of professional work across. So how did the president choose you to do this job? And how have you been able to convince the NDC foot soldiers that you are not a stranger?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say that we must focus our attention first and foremost as Ghanaians and what we can do individually and collectively to help nation building.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
On the committee work so far, and obviously on your new role. We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Life is a celebration of moments. Big and small.
The sun is scorching, I'm feeling the heat.
With Piva Drink, every moment becomes a refreshing celebration. From the beach to your home, in every corner of your world, Piva Drink adds a burst of refreshment.
Give me Piva cocktail and tangerine.
Celebrate every moment with Piva Drink. Refreshment for every occasion. Piva Drink, a taste you will love.
P for Piva.
This advert is FDA approved.
Thank you, Bernard.
The American team went to GIPC.
Yes.
So what's the difference in the two roles? What were you doing for the American team? What are you going to do for Ghana as GIPC CEO?
Well, with the American team, we were just focused on trade and investment between Ghana and the US. So it's bilateral. But with GIPC, it's Ghana's investment with the rest of the world. So anyone that has money to invest in Ghana. So the focus is wider, but it's the same set of principles.
So if I understand it, when you were in the chamber, you were getting American businesses to invest here.
Absolutely.
And for those who invest here to get a good deal.
Good deal. The environment. So we're looking at the business environment, which is the investment environment. And the critical part of our job then was also to promote Ghana in the US as a favorable destination for US foreign direct investment. So that was a key part of our job, and that I've done over the years.
So this is a good platform to now take over GIPC. Because now you know what the investment community wants.
Absolutely.
You understand the problems here.
Absolutely.
I need to set a little controversy.
Okay.
There was an appointment before yours and you came. What was all that about? Because initially there was somebody there, and I think a week or so later you were appointed. Can you clarify for us? Was it our mistake in announcing the wrong appointment, or was it just the president's prerogative in changing the appointment?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm not in a position to provide an answer to that. I think that's entirely for government spokesperson to answer that. I wouldn't know what really happened. What I know is that I've been appointed and I've taken over the job, and that's what I've been doing.
How important is the role of GIPC boss and GIPC in government's economic plan generally?
Well, GIPC is critical because, first and foremost, this country relies heavily on foreign direct investment. And, as an agency set up to promote foreign direct investment, it is critical in ensuring that, one, remain attractive, remain competitive, and that we have the kind of FDI that we need to develop our own people, pay taxes, transfer technology and skills onto our people, and help us really globalize. Because what happens with foreign direct investment is that in partnership with local businesses, our own local businesses now develop the capabilities to also compete globally. They become, global within their own work and how they work. They work with good corporate practices. They work with international standards. So GIPC plays a critical role in the nation's development or economic forward.
One of the challenges we'll have seen is that
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Bernard. I think that's a very good question, but we need to look at it differently. So one, as a country, we have our natural competitive areas. So we have natural resources. You have gold, you have oil. With those products, even if you're at war, it's not everywhere in the world. So you are going to get people coming to invest in those ones. But what we need to do is how do we transcend beyond the ones that we are naturally competitive to actually diversifying FDI in developing our entire country. So what I've been thinking about with the team is we need to come up with mapping out the investment opportunities in all of our districts, which will result in regional investment opportunities. Now, these are the advantages. One, it will help our local businessmen who often feel like they've been left out to know where the opportunities are. So I can be in Accra and there's a great opportunity in Volta region which I can assess by looking at how do I take advantage of that. So that will be very important for us. It will also help our own missions, our missions abroad to market the country. Instead of being very general, we'll be able to say if you want to farm along the Volta Lake, these are the products that will do well. These are the communities. This is how you access that. So that will be good for us. And then for people like yourself who are in the media, you play a critical role in the country's attractiveness. What you say matters. So if you have that data, you'll be able to market the country. In essence, what I'm saying is that we need to move away from the ones that we are naturally competitive on and looking at where the opportunities are and how to map that out. And then with that, we'll be able to sell our country to ourselves and to those who are interested. So think about it this way. If we are able to work with the regional ministers, right, in coming up with the opportunities in their regions. So we have a blueprint. If the president of Ghana is traveling around the world, he can refer to that blueprint. Just casually look, 16 regions. These are the opportunities that I have. If you are interested in manufacturing or light manufacturing, come to Shire Hills. This is where the opportunities are. Or go to another place. This is where you'll find it. So those are the things that we need to do, and those are the things that we'll be working on.
Finally, now that we are here, I noticed you've been in the private sector session. How have you seen the conference so far, and what are your expectations around what this can do to catalyze transformation, which is the president's objective for putting the conference together?
Well, I believe that one thing that I heard is that what we call collective intelligence is what will help us to develop. Because the country is for all of us. So your opinion, my opinion, and what we think ought to be done is important. I think that this is what this conference has really directed all of us to. Trying to bring everybody on board so we can, with one cause, decide what we need to do. And then with that, we'll be able to move forward collectively. So I think that's essential. And then two, the president is trying to, jam up or wake up the spirit of entrepreneurship in the Ghanaian. He's trying to cut a new path. And it is critical for us to understand that he's been speaking about Ghana open for business again. It will be a general campaign to reassure the international business community and the local business community that indeed the country is open for business again. And it will not be business as usual, but his interest is to see us stay on the course so we can bring in the needed business for our own development.
I'll leave you now to go and continue your delegation.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother. I hope to catch up with you in your studios very soon. All right.
Curious about what's happening beyond your borders? Beyond Borders takes you there. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m., join Caleb Kuda as he explores the stories that shape our world, connecting you with Ghanaians in other cultures and seeing the world through their eyes.
So we've learned one thing: you leave your shoes outside. Wow.
Tuesdays, you know, I won't go to Ghana dressed in a Lacoste.
As director of operations.
From international politics to the human stories that define nations, Beyond Borders brings you a fresh perspective of Ghanaians around the world, one conversation at a time. Beyond Borders with Caleb Kuda airs Wednesdays at 7 p.m. only on Channel 1 TV.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you. Great.
We're also privileged to have the founder CEO. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
So let me start with
Thank you very much, Bernard. I think so far so good. The patronage was good, but what is even more important, the discussions, the plenary was very good, and the whole concept of a national dialogue on economy for me is very important, because before I agree that there have been some challenges with the Ghanaian economy, no doubt about it. Since we had the Russia-Ukraine war, the COVID, and all those externalities, and of course our own internal challenges have all led to the challenges we have in the economy today. And I think previous government and Carriga, everybody acknowledges it. And therefore, if you have a challenge, the best way to deal with it is that you discuss and come up with a strategy. And I think the government's approach of involving as many people as possible, involving the key stakeholders to bring their experiences, their ideas, to carve a new strategy going forward is very important. I remember I was part of the Century One, that was done about 10 years ago. It took similar form, and I think it made a lot of impact. I remember immediately afterwards, government had to even resort to IMF and all that. So I think that what is important is that we discuss the critical issues of pertinent interest, critical issues affecting the economy, bringing all these other stakeholders together, and then getting the different perspective from different sectors, and then putting them together and clearly defining a pathway forward. And then we follow through to make sure that we implement to improve the economy that we have.
Thank you. I'll come back to you.
Well, thank you, Bernard. Listening to the president and also listening to Ishmael Yamson and Dr. Iwa Makuo speaking, it paints the picture of where we want to be, the tragedy over the past years, and where everybody in the sector now is talking about we need to look at the long-term strategy. How do we become food sufficient? How do we reduce our food import bill? How do we make sure that as a country we do have a national commitment towards financing of our own food? And for me, those are the three things that are coming up strongly. And if we can be able to work towards that and achieve that, at least for the medium term to a long-term strategy, we should be able to galvanize some forces, especially looking at the sub-region. We are getting so exposed now with the way the other countries are going about blocking their food ban and all that. This is the time where we need to invest more into our food, taking money from the extractive sector into the food sector, because the extractive sector will diminish in no time, but we need to keep ourselves food secure as a country, not for 10 years, not for 20 years, for as long as the world will continue to exist. There is that, there must be that commitment from both civil society groups, religious group, government, to make sure that we are addressing our food security concern.
Wonderful. Now, API, we've always
I mean, we foresaw this way back. We knew that these donor supports will not be there forever. At some point, you receive a bit of support. So what is important, when you receive such support, how do you channel it to the productive areas so that it can have a multiplier effect? One day when they withdraw their support, they will be resilient enough to sustain whatever you are doing. So we foresaw this happening. Unfortunately, over the years, I don't think that we've channeled the support to the critical areas of industry and agriculture and the linkages that gives us that kind of sustainability. And today, here we are, they're saying we are withdrawing a lot of our support. But I think that it's unfortunate, but then it also creates opportunities, as we're saying, because if there are no such support, how do we look inward? How do we ensure that we actually create opportunities for our own companies, for our own members, for industries, for agriculture, and then feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and produce a lot of the things we need in this country. When we do that, we'll be able to create the jobs and generate the taxes. So it is possible. It is possible in the sense that if we indeed empower a few, and we are looking at, you are talking to Maurice, you're talking about agriculture. I'm talking about industry, and I'm talking about the linkages between the two. If you develop the value chains very well, and agriculture is producing, and industry is there to offtake, and then there is the linkage between the two, the logistics and everything, the chain works. We will see that we produce a lot, and we'll be producing them at a competitive price. When we do so, at a competitive cost, and we sell at a competitive price, we can capture our own market and can even export outside, because we have a lot of opportunities in terms of the resources. So we see the challenge thrown to us as industry, but we also want to have a conducive business environment that makes it work, because we've talked a lot about macroeconomic today, macroeconomic environment. If you don't have your macroeconomic framework in place in the right manner, CD must not, the exchange rate shouldn't be that bad. It should be within reasonable range. Interest costs should not be that high so that people can borrow and do business. Inflation must be contained within reasonable range. When you get all this macroeconomic right, and then also electricity, a lot of factors that are not within the control of the businesses have to be set right, because that is set at the government level. Let's get it right, and the businesses will live up to the expectation and do business. So I agree, it's a challenge that is thrown to us, but that challenge also requires some support, some setting by the government, and then private sector will take advantage. And as industries, we can be sure that we produce to feed the masses.
So there is a new history now. How important is that in our
Well, Bernard, this point in time gives us the opportunity to redefine our agriculture sector and the agro-industry sector. Agribusiness permits at both levels, either the primary level or the mid or the upstream. We are very much integrated. What we need to be looking at is to align all our agriculture sector development activities. If we talk about AU, African Union, NEPAD, they are looking at special economic zones. UNIDO is also looking at the agro-industrial parks. If you've heard the President, His Excellency talk, he said he's committed to reducing food, the cost of food production, the cost of food on the market for consumers. We're also looking at increasing our food competitiveness, productivity, how to increase our production. But what we need to be looking at is we need to contextualize the current skills we have in the country, in the agriculture sector. Do we have the kind of skills that are able to impact on productivity and be competitive? Two, do we have the kind of financing regime that makes it easy, just like my brother said was talking about, to be able to access credit? And if you look at where the His Excellency has been engaging the various stakeholders, you see that he's putting a lot of commitment in place. But we at the sector, we are looking at, for the over 12 years now, we'll be talking about how do we develop the agro-industry. Agro-industry cannot be developed in the opium. We need to look at the raw material cancer, and I think my brother will also agree with me on that. Take each of the commodities and develop the value chain analysis. Then we can say that this is the base. So when we say what is the wealth of Ghana's agriculture sector, then we can know that this is the wealth of the Ghana. So what, for instance, when you take poultry, you can do the value chain analysis of poultry. It's a policy, the poultry sector is worth $2 billion. You take the rice sector, you can say the rice sector is worth $5 billion. So then you move to the horticulture, you move to aquaculture, you move to all the other externalities. Based on that, you can say, okay, Ghana's agriculture sector and the agro-industry sector is worth maybe 50 billion. So when you are going for financing regime or some kind of financing system, you know how to align the financing to the priorities and the regime of the value chain that is of our priority. For instance, if you take poultry employs more than 50% of the value chain players, from rice to maize, the feed millers, the feed additives, the poultry farmers, those processing, and also the cold chain people. You're talking about almost 8 to 9 value chain players actively. So it is a sector where we need to prioritize. Look at tomatoes. Ghana is the largest consumer of tomatoes in West Africa per capita. And you see that most of the continental and the regional companies have moved to Ghana now. Some are doing about 10,000 hectares of tomatoes to feed the factory. We are importing tomatoes from Morocco. We are importing tomatoes from Burkina Faso. Tomatoes are coming from South Africa to feed industries here. How do we make sure that our industries are aligned with the right variety that we have, the right condition, so that we'll be able to be competitive, even if we have to add value and export? Those are the competitive things we need to be looking at.
Well, first of all, I'm happy that this is taking place before the budget is read. So we are assuming and we are hoping that the inputs here will reflect in the budget. That's very important. Being reflected in the budget also means that it will go through appropriation, parliament, as it becomes a law. And therefore, government, once you put in the budget, you are required to, implement some of them. Now, the key thematic areas, they are all very important to private sector development, be it infrastructure or core private sector activity or macroeconomic issues. They are all very important. And my expectation is that for each one of them, there will be clear, defined targets to be achieved. There will be clear, identifiable institutions and organizations to play specific roles. Those will also be defined. And then when it's all defined, then there will be clear strategy for implementing the very measures that we have agreed that will help reset the economy. When we have agreed on that, then we expect that implementation will take place.
So what we want to achieve, who is supposed to do it, when we want to do it, and how we want to do it.
Yes.
These are the 4 things you want to see.
And then I also want to hear the monitoring mechanism for monitoring all that has been said will be done, and then how we get it done. The president mentioned something which I think is very important. He's saying that he's going to be involving key stakeholders in the process of implementation, and I think that's also very important. So we are expecting to be invited and to be involved a lot more to make sure we achieve the results.
Let me give a final word for you.
One of the key things we're looking at, we want to thank the president for creating the agribusiness ministry. Now, how do we drive the ministry in the agribusiness? We want the agribusiness development and regulatory authority now to come in place. We're talking about the ease of doing business in the industry. So you want to see the Food and Drugs Authority, the Standards Authority, all those places coming together in one, one-stop shop activity. Now, while that is going on, we want to see commitment in terms of financing for the agriculture sector, commitment in terms of addressing the Kampala Declaration of the African Union, how we are addressing our shortfalls in food importation. Then also we need to be very deliberate on industries development. And I think that this is where the 24-hour economy comes in. Going forward, we want to see clarity in our food systems, in that it supports both the skill sector, it supports both the private sector, and it supports all our food security strategies as a country.
Thank you very much. We're still here.